Ukraine just launched a powerful missile strike on a Russian warship in the Black Sea. At first, it looked like the ship could withstand the attack, but what happened next shocked everyone watching and changed the balance of naval power, leaving Russia humiliated and Ukraine's message crystal clear. At 5:30 a.m., the calm of the Black Sea was shattered when Ukraine launched a coordinated strike against a Russian warship anchored near Sevastopol. The target was no ordinary vessel. It was an Admiral Grigorovich-class ship worth over $4.5 billion, armed with Kaliber cruise missiles, surface-to-air defenses, and advanced radar systems. This warship was designed to project Moscow's power across the region, to hit Ukrainian cities with long-range missiles, and to intimidate NATO allies watching from afar. On that morning, it was preparing for another strike on Ukraine's southern infrastructure, loaded with Kaliber missiles ready to fire. But Ukraine's commanders had been watching closely, and they chose this exact moment to deliver their blow. The attack began with the launch of multiple long-range Neptune anti-ship missiles, Ukraine's domestically produced weapon that had already gained a reputation for sinking the Moskva cruiser in 2022. These were not fired blindly. They were part of a carefully staged assault. Alongside the missiles came naval drones from Ukraine's 13th Marine Drone Brigade, speeding across the water at nearly 50 knots, each loaded with explosive payloads. This combination of missiles from the sky and drones from the sea created a two-pronged strike designed to overwhelm Russian defenses. The horizon lit up as trails of smoke cut across the early dawn sky, racing toward the ship. On the ship's deck, Russian sailors scrambled to stations as alarms blared. The ship's radar operators detected incoming threats, but the speed and coordination of the attack left little time to react. The Admiral Grigorovich-class ship was supposed to be protected by a shield of coastal air defenses, including S-300s and Pantsir S-1 systems stationed along Crimea's shoreline. But the Ukrainian assault was already inside the shield, slipping through mapped gaps in coverage. Within minutes, Russian interceptors fired into the sky, and anti-aircraft tracers streaked across the water. Some drones were destroyed, erupting in small fireballs before crashing into the sea. But too many kept coming. Then came the first strike. A Neptune missile slammed into the midsection of the ship, punching through its steel armor and tearing into the engine compartments. The blast threw flames high into the sky, rocking the vessel and sending smoke pouring from the ruptured hull. Sailors were thrown off their feet, alarms shrieked louder, and fire suppression systems kicked in desperately. Seconds later, another missile smashed into the ship's radar mast, destroying its primary targeting systems. Without radar, the ship was blind. Its ability to detect further threats or coordinate defense was crippled in an instant. The drones closed in at the same time, weaving past cannon fire and slamming into the vessel's stern. Explosions tore through fuel tanks and launch cells loaded with Kaliber missiles. The result was catastrophic. Ammunition began to cook off in a chain reaction, detonating one after another, creating a series of fireballs that lit up Sevastopol's coastline. Residents miles away reported hearing the blasts and seeing the sky glow red as the ship burned. In less than 10 minutes, a $4.5 billion symbol of Russian naval pride had become a floating inferno. The strike on the $4.5 billion ship was not a random event. It was the result of weeks of careful planning, surveillance, and intelligence gathering by Ukrainian and allied forces. For days, small reconnaissance drones had circled Sevastopol harbor at high altitude, sending back live imagery of Russian naval activity. They watched the ship's resupply convoys arrive, hauling Kaliber cruise missiles, fuel, and food to sustain long deployments. Satellite photos from NATO partners confirmed that the ship was not only armed, but also scheduled for operations against Ukraine's energy grid and transport hubs in Odessa and Mykolaiv. This was not just another ship in port, it was a key part of Russia's offensive capabilities in the Black Sea. Ukraine's military knew that striking such a vessel carried massive risks. Russia had surrounded Crimea with a thick wall of defenses. S-300 and S-400 missile systems guarded the skies. Pantsir S-1 units dotted the shoreline, ready to intercept drones or low-flying missiles. Russian Mi-28 helicopters patrolled the coastlines, searching for threats. The port of Sevastopol itself was lined with coastal artillery and radar systems, making it one of the most heavily fortified naval bases in the world. For Moscow, this ship was safe inside its shield. For Ukraine, it was the perfect opportunity to prove otherwise. The planning process started weeks earlier, when Ukraine's 13th Marine Drone Brigade tested new naval drones in the Black Sea. These small but powerful craft could travel long distances at high speed while carrying explosive payloads. Their mission was to breach the ship's defenses, distract close-in weapons, and hit vulnerable sections near the waterline. At the same time, Neptune anti-ship missile crews drilled relentlessly, preparing to fire in tight coordination with the naval drones. It would be a combined arms strike, one that Russia's layered defenses had never faced before. Intelligence also revealed a critical vulnerability. While the ship was armed and ready, it often anchored in shallow waters outside Sevastopol harbor to reduce congestion. In this position, it relied less on coastal defenses and more on its onboard radar and close-in weapon systems. Ukraine's planners saw the gap. If missiles and drones were launched together, the ship's defenses could be saturated before it could retreat or call in support from nearby ships. This was the moment they were waiting for. The final piece of the setup involved electronic warfare. Ukrainian EW teams in Odessa and Mykolaiv had been studying Russian radar frequencies and communication signals for months. They prepared jammers capable of sending ghost signals and creating false radar targets. These would be switched on during the strike to confuse Russian operators and slow their response time. By the time Russia realized which blips on their screens were real, the missiles would already be closing in. When the plan was finally approved, everything was set. Reconnaissance confirmed the ship was loaded with Kaliber missiles and anchored outside Sevastopol. Satellite images showed nearby defenses active but spread thin. Ukraine's strike package, Neptune missiles, naval drones, and electronic warfare units, was positioned and waiting. In the early hours of that morning, the order was given. The setup was complete. The ship had no idea it was about to face its deadliest hour. At 5:50 a.m., the strike began. From hidden launch sites along Ukraine's southern coastline, a volley of Neptune anti-ship missiles roared into the air, their engines leaving faint trails against the morning sky. At the same time, several explosive naval drones skimmed across the surface of the Black Sea, moving low and fast like shadows racing toward the Russian frigate. The attack was timed with precision, missiles from above, drones from below, and electronic warfare interference pulsing through the region. The frigate's crew had no warning until alarms screamed inside the command deck, signaling multiple inbound threats closing fast. Russian radar operators scrambled to track the targets. The frigate's advanced search radar lit up, identifying fast-moving signatures coming from the northwest. Along the coast, Pantsir S-1 units whirred to life, launching bursts of 57 E-6 missiles skyward. S-300 batteries deeper inside Crimea fired larger interceptors, streaking across the horizon in long white arcs. The defenses were massive and loud, but the timing was already against them. Ukrainian jammers from Odessa blasted out false signals, filling Russian screens with ghost targets. Operators struggled to lock onto the real threats, firing interceptors into empty sky, while the real missiles kept closing the gap. Meanwhile, the naval drones advanced silently across the waves. These were not ordinary craft. Each carried hundreds of pounds of explosives and used AI-assisted navigation to weave through incoming fire. The frigate's close-in weapons, the AK-630 cannons, opened up, spewing thousands of 30mm rounds per minute, trying to shred the drones before they got close. Water erupted into geysers as shells raked the surface. Some drones were destroyed, exploding harmlessly in the sea, but several more slipped through the chaos, closing within striking distance. Above, one Neptune missile was intercepted mid-air, exploding in a flash before it could reach the ship, but two others kept flying low, hugging the radar horizon. By the time the frigate realized they had survived the defenses, it was too late. The first missile screamed toward midship, its warhead locked on steel plating just above the waterline. The second angled toward the superstructure, aiming for the frigate's radar and communication towers. The crew tried evasive maneuvers, but the ship's massive size made sharp turns impossible. The gap between launch and impact had narrowed to seconds. Inside the command deck, Russian officers shouted orders, frantically trying to coordinate defensive fire. The AK-630 guns kept blazing, and helicopters were scrambled from nearby bases. but the window was gone. The first Neptune slammed into the ship's side with devastating force, the warhead punching through armor before detonating deep inside the hull. The shockwave tore through the engine compartments, blasting flames out of the midsection. The second missile struck moments later, ripping into the radar mast. Fire and debris erupted skyward, blinding the frigate's targeting systems and silencing its communication arrays in an instant. At the same moment, one naval drone rammed into the stern, exploding beneath the deck near the ship's propulsion systems. The blast tore open a hole at the waterline, flooding compartments and crippling maneuverability. In less than 2 minutes, the $4.5 billion warship had gone from a symbol of strength to a burning wreck. The first contact was over, and Ukraine had just landed its most devastating blow of the war. The destruction was immediate, but the full consequences of the strike would unfold in waves. The first Neptune impact ripped open the frigate's hull, tearing through reinforced compartments designed to house engines, generators, and emergency systems. Seawater rushed in at a rate no damage control team could hope to contain. Pumps failed almost instantly, and the ship began to list. The second impact obliterated the radar mast and communication arrays, cutting the frigate off from command centers in Sevastopol. In one moment, the vessel went blind, deaf, and crippled. A billion-dollar machine silenced by a few precision missiles. The naval drone's blast to the stern sealed the ship's fate. With propulsion lost and fire raging through compartments, the crew had no choice but to abandon battle stations. Lifeboats splashed into the sea as thick smoke and fire consumed the decks. From the shore, residents of Sevastopol witnessed a sight they hadn't seen since the Moskva's sinking in 2022. A massive Russian warship engulfed in flames, explosions lighting up the sky like thunderclaps. Caliber cruise missiles stored on board began detonating inside their cells, one by one, sending secondary fireballs hundreds of feet high. Each explosion shook the ground for miles, shattering windows in the city and forcing civilians into shelters. Satellite imagery released hours later showed black plumes rising over the port, stretching far into the upper atmosphere. The fire burned so hot that infrared satellites captured the heat signatures across southern Ukraine, evidence of the scale of destruction. Strategically, the blow was catastrophic for Moscow. The frigate had been one of the few Russian ships capable of long-range caliber missile strikes against Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. With its destruction, Russia lost a crucial piece of its Black Sea fleet, and more importantly, a platform designed to intimidate both Ukraine and NATO. Military analysts estimated it would take Russia years to replace the vessel, not just because of the cost, $4.5 billion, but because sanctions blocked access to many of the advanced components needed for construction. The caliber missiles lost in the explosion represented dozens of potential strikes that would never be launched, saving untold civilian lives across Ukraine. Politically, the fallout in Moscow was severe. Russian state media initially tried to downplay the incident as a fire aboard a ship. But within hours, footage from civilians in Crimea showed a burning warship listing in the harbor, impossible to deny. Outrage spread across Russian social media, with families demanding answers about sailors reported missing. Western governments, meanwhile, praised the strike as another example of Ukraine's growing ability to project power deep into Russian-occupied territory. For NATO planners, the event proved that precision missiles and drones could dismantle billion-dollar warships once thought untouchable. The message was brutal and clear. Ukraine had shown again that cost is no shield. While Russia poured billions into building warships, Ukraine spent thousands on drones and domestically produced missiles. And the results spoke for themselves. The frigate's destruction was not just another military loss. It was a symbol of how the balance in the Black Sea had shifted. For Moscow's admirals, the warning was undeniable: sail again, and you will sink again.